think we are live. Yes, I'm getting confirmation. We're live. So, Jillian, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to everyone for coming to this. We were just talking about all the events and stuff happening, so it feels really great that people are taking the time out of their day to come to this live session we're having here. So, Jillian, maybe I can just do like a quick intro to you, and then you can correct me on things, and then we can kick it off. So yeah, you come from being a community lead at a lot of like illustrious companies that are probably well known of, like Zapier, BAE Systems, not BAE Systems, and now at Calendly. So yeah, lots of experience. That's probably great for the group here. And then before kicking it off, I just wanted to I forgot I need to do some housekeeping things. So there is a chat that everyone's encouraged to participate in. We'll take questions from the audience and we'll even highlight them. And you can use emojis to upvote them. So I'll try to do my best job of moderating to surface the questions that everyone's giving a thumbs up to. And then it looks like we're recording just fine now, no hiccups for this event. So we will be sharing the recording out in the next 24 to 48 hours or so. And with that, we can, there's another thing. At 2:20 Eastern time, 11:20 Pacific time, there is a nationwide emergency alert. So that should be fun to see if anything happens in 20 minutes. So lots of fun stuff happening during this time. So with that, let's kick things off. I'll pass it over to you, Jillian. And maybe we could just start with your origin story and your path into community and how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's really funny. I'm looking at the news this morning, and I was like, of course, today is the nationwide emergency alert test. Fortunately, I'm just doing a virtual session. I've turned off all of my devices, but I am feeling for anyone who's presenting this afternoon, either at CMX or CR Connect, and all of the phones are going to blow up in the audience. There's going to be so much noise. So I don't have that problem. But thoughts are for everyone else. But yeah, so thank you for having me, and you did my introduction wonderfully. Yeah, I guess my origin story. So I ended up in community very accidentally. My background is actually in engineering. I grew up thinking I was either going to be a marine biologist or a mechanical engineer. I know, very different things, but what can I say? Ended up going to school for architectural engineering. And while I was still in college, I was part of a beta program for a company called Autodesk, which is architectural software. And I was really, really good at crashing their software, phenomenal at crashing their software. I think they had a love-hate relationship with me, and I was really active in their community and everything like that. And they ended up actually offering me a job, and I was like, sweet. So, I ended up going to Autodesk, and I'm working on their support team. I'm working on their QA team, all of that good stuff. And I was, very young at that point, super early 20s, and, very confident as we all are when we're early 20s. And I made a fuss over how people weren't getting answers on social media, how the community really wasn't working all that great. Just kind of stuff like that. I didn't like the feeling that people were getting ignored. And I made enough of a fuss that finally someone came to me and said, fine, you don't like it? Here's the keys to the community. Go fix it. And I was like, oh no, what did I do? I had no idea this was a thing. I knew communities were a thing. I'd been involved in them, basically since the start of the internet. But now being told hey, go actually run this thing. If you don't like it, go fix it. And I went on a wild spree of Googling and researching, and found out that it was a whole field called community management. I was like, okay, I guess I'll try. And I tried, and I loved it. And that was that. I ended up leaving architectural engineering in the past, and ended up going on to, run community at Autodesk, Community Roundtable, which is really cool. I got to go work as a consultant at companies around the world. BAE Systems, which is a defense contractor, then on the Zapier, and now I'm at Calendly. So it's been kind of an interesting path, but it means that I tend to approach things very scientifically. I'm an introvert, I'm a nerd, and I love data far more than I love emotions and I love people. So it's kind of like my MO, I guess. That's just the way that I operate.
Yeah, I guess that nice transition into like the next area I wanted to get into is like why data? Like, I feel like people don't think of like community and data like hand in hand, or like what is your interest? What spurred your interest in data? Was it like your engineering background, or can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So yes, it was my engineering background, and my interest in marine biology and all those things. Like I've always loved science. My goal my entire life, and even now, is I always want to think of myself as a scientist. I want to think of myself as a researcher. Um, and what really fascinated me about community very, very early on was, you see these communities working and you see certain behaviors, you see things like mob mentality, you see people trolling, you see people exhibiting specific behaviors, even though we didn't tell them to do that thing. And I was like, this is cool. This is really, really cool. And I am one of those people who doesn't believe that humans and our behaviors are random. I think that they are very, very predictable. I think you can calculate them. Um, and the moment someone handed me like the behind the scenes of the Autodesk community and was like, go make a dashboard, build a report, and I saw billions of data points, I was in love. I was in love, and I've been in love since then with data. I just love the whole idea that you can find logic and patterns and trends, um, and you can even figure out how to predict the future and how to influence someone's behaviors by taking these billions of data points and artfully combing through them, manipulating them, analyzing them, and you end up getting some incredible insights.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel yeah, with billions of data points, I feel like it seems like it could be a little overwhelming for maybe some people on here too. Is like, I think with community data, and it's like all like, it's essentially like users interacting with things. It's like comes in all sorts of directions and maybe even like different like surface areas. So like wondering how you take those billion data points and like organize them into like pieces that are analyzable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so it was really funny, like way, 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 way back when, like I'd been in community for probably about a year, and I got asked to speak at a conference. And it was the first time I'd ever done public speaking of that type, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to talk about? And I decided to actually talk about data. Um, and the advice that I very nervously gave on my first stage ever was never, never, ever open up your data without having a question in mind. You should always, always, always have a very specific thing that you're trying to figure out. And you don't even need to know what data is available. You don't even know how you're going to calculate it, how you're going to analyze it, but you need to have that question in mind. Um, Unless you're like super, super comfortable in data, like data is your happy place, opening up those giant CSV files or those, connected tables or whatever you have and not having that question, you're going to get overwhelmed. Like it's just a bunch of numbers, it's just a bunch of data. That
Mhm.
question is what actually connects it. And so that's what I always tell people. Like don't get overwhelmed by the data. Focus on one question at a time. And then if you want to add questions onto that, and then you want to start looking at the data, that's okay. And it promise it won't overwhelm you as bad if you do it like that.
Mm. And then maybe like tactically, like what are some questions to ask of your data for some folks to get started, or like what are the right questions, or maybe there are no right questions. I don't know what are some good options to try.
It's funny. There honestly are no right questions. It really depends on what type of community you're running, what the goal of your community is, um, your comfort level with data, who your audience is, and everything like that. What I will say is that, over my career, what I have pretty much kind of figured out is that no matter what community you're working on, you can pretty much break down your metrics into three key buckets. The first
Mm.
one being audience, the second one being consumption, and the third one being engagement. Easy way to remember this is ACE. So it's your ACE metrics. Um, and the reason I like this is because anytime you're having a conversation with someone, usually their question that they're going to ask you has something to do with one of these three buckets. They're asking you, well, how many people are in the community? How many members do we have? How big is our reach? That's your audience. You get a lot of questions about, well, what are people looking at? And like, are we busy enough? Are we this? Are we that? That's consumption. Like, doesn't matter if you're a community of practice or if you're a community of support or an ideation community, that's consumption. And then, a lot of times I'll get questions about, well, who's doing things in community? How much are they doing? What impact are they having on our community? That's engagement. And so pretty much all the time, like those ACE buckets can pretty much kind of be that start for you, whether your community is 20 years old, or in my case, Calendly community is about what, I think we're 12 days old at this point. And I'm
Wow.
already using ACE metrics over here too.
And how do you get that access to that data? Is it just like the way I think about it is like, okay, you have your audience table, consumption table, engagement table. It's all in a data warehouse, like, and then you can just query that data warehouse. But is there like a tool? Is there tools or other things that you use? Like, I'm sure it's not that simple, but
Oh
that's like
gosh,
where I
no.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny. So across my career, I've had every type of relationship with data that you could possibly imagine. I've had companies that were like, mm-mm, you can't use any external tools whatsoever. If it's on the internet, you can't use it. It has to be on-prem only. That was the defense industry. Like you couldn't use anything really. Like we used Power BI and Excel. Like that was our world.
Wow.
Then I get to Zapier, and they had the most stunning data science and data warehouse philosophy I've ever seen in any company. I don't think anyone's going to come close ever again. And then now here at Calendly, we're doing a lot of work to get to that really like best in practice place. But the reality is right now, the extent of my data is what I get from my platform and anything else that I can scrounge up. Which is funny because a lot of times when I talk to people, they're like, oh, you must have everything. And it's like, no, actually, I have the same amount of data as most people do. I'm just resourceful and I know how to kind of get the things that I want out of that data.
Mhm. And by platform, you just mean like your whatever you're using for community management platform. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
yeah. What about outside of the bounds of that? Are you looking at any other sources? Like I could imagine like Reddit threads within like the right kind of topics, or like something on like Hacker News, or it spans probably like a gamut of lots of different like surface area outside of just the bounds of your community platform. So are you looking at any of that data as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's obviously that there's analytical tools that are outside of my platform that help me measure my platform. So things like Google Search Console and Google Analytics, those are really helpful. They definitely give us a lot more perspective. Um, and then more on the qualitative side. So kind of what you're talking about there. This is now so metrics are quantitative, but a lot of times there's also a qualitative analytical aspect. And that's things where, yeah, I did sit down and go through Reddit and Stack Overflow and Twitter and Facebook. And I did a lot of Google searches and a lot of looking on YouTube to understand what were people talking about and kind of start collecting data points. And obviously it's not all encompassing, but it gives us a lot of information to start working with. And that's the whole point of data. Whether you're a quantitative data nerd or a qualitative data nerd, it all comes together. The point is to give you non-emotional perspective in order to make strategic decisions and choices.
Mhm, mhm. And like, I guess maybe switching topics a little bit is, when you're just getting started with this at Calendly now, so it's probably top of mind of like, what is the objective of our community? How does it help? How does it like translate into business impact? And so like, I would love to know like if you have a thesis there yet of like, okay, this is the metric, or this is like what we want to how we want to grow this thriving community, grow into a thriving community, and like how are you thinking about like the inputs to that, and like how you're measuring like the success of that. Like you can use, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be Calendly, it could be like your experiences Zapier or anywhere too.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, so like for instance, accounting, yes, this is actually really, really front of mind because every few weeks I'm doing like an executive presentation where I'm talking about the metrics and I'm talking about the qualitative and the quantitative and kind of like that like actionable intel. I'm making sure that they have all of that. And I'm actually right now just working on what I'm going to tell them about in September. Um, and what's interesting about this is the list that I basically collect every single week and every single month, and they'll be every quarter, is I have a list of the information that I currently have available to me and what I'm going to do with that information. And then I also have a list of the metrics that I don't have yet. But these are the things that are really, really important for us to be able to measure the impact of community and even just self serve entirely on the company. And so, objectively speaking, one of the things that's really important is we very much believe that people who are active in community are going to be more engaged with Calendly as a product. So they are going to be weekly active users. They are going to use more advanced features. And so these are the things where I can't measure it yet because, you talk about like data
Mhm.
warehouses, that requires you pulling in community data into weekly active user data and like product data. And we just can't do that yet. It's just not something that we currently have set up. But regardless, I can talk about how many people are coming in the community. What are those people doing in the community? What trends are we seeing from community? What feedback are we getting from community? And all of this tells us a lot because now we're able to say, oh, that thing about availability, wow, that's actually getting a lot more views. And that's actually really aligning with what our support team is seeing. And that's also aligning with what we're hearing in user interviews. And if you take those three data points together, you now have a really compelling story. Um, so even though I don't have, this incredible data warehouse yet, we're still able to feed into those objectives and those theories
by
that
by way of
the
like
company has.
triangulation of most like this and this and this are all
Yeah,
kind of like we're getting the same kind of patterns in these three areas, even though you're not
exactly.
able to connect the dots perfectly with like a SQL query or something.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting too. Is I mean, I think a lot of people in here are probably thinking themselves like, "Oh, well, I don't have a lot of data experience. Like, how much am I actually be able to do?" You're a community manager though, and you have that perspective. You have that ability to see a trend in complete and utter chaos, even if it's not data backed. You can see that trend. You're good at listening, um, and that's a really good example of where you can now go use data and say, what are people talking about? Does that align with my observation? That's a question. You can actually go into your data now and test that question.
And then like for when people are, you know, whatever data that they get like to answer those questions, is it like are you pretty much reliant on the platform? Are you just like gonna dig through an Excel like a CSV data dump? Like how do you and if I feel like platforms are somewhat limited sometimes, so like how are you like extracting those summarized like insights? Or what's a
It
good way
all
to go
depends
about
on
doing that? Yeah.
Yeah, it all depends on what I'm doing. It all depends on what tools I have available to me. I'll say right now, for instance, a big thing that I'm using is basically word analysis. So I'm pulling the title and I'm pulling the body of a topic and saying, okay, what are people saying in here, and are there any similarities? Is there anything that like I'm picking up? Um, Obviously, I don't have a ton of data yet with Calendly community because it's so new. But that's something we did a lot of at Zapier, was basically kind of pulling all of them. And one thing that was really, really cool was actually using AI to distill what is that topic about, what keywords are coming out of that topic, and then can we use that to categorize the post, which was really, really cool.
Yeah, and I guess we made it a record, like almost 20 minutes into the conversation without talking about AI. But is that kind of like what you're using for the summarization of things? It's just like throw a bunch of like words at something and get sentiment analysis back.
It's not so much sentiment analysis. It's more or less like, so for instance, if someone comes to Calendly community and they say, hey, I use Outlook. I'm trying to schedule this. I'm a teacher. I have students. The students are using this. There's a lot going on there, but AI is really good at just pulling out kind of trends. It's really, really good at
Mhm,
doing
mhm.
word analysis. And so that's one of the things I like using it for. I will say I don't currently have it set up in Calendly community, but it was something I was doing a lot of in Zapier community, and it was really cool. And it's also nice too because you're not asking it a question. You're not letting it, hallucinate. You're literally saying, what are the keywords that are evident in this post? And that's like a really, really kind of safe way to use it and take some of the mental load off of you doing the actual analysis.
Yeah. Actually, I just thought of an off the cuff question. Since I mean, it sounds like you had like a pretty really like a lot of great experience and learned a ton at Zapier. And I feel like I've had similar things in my career where it's like, oh, I've done these things and like at a fast growing company, but then like I'm starting new and I have a blank slate and like I'm gonna not do any of the wrong stuff anymore and like not making the same mistakes and making new mistakes. So I'm curious like what how it feels when you're starting from a blank slate and like if that's like exciting or like what mistakes you're not going to carry through.
Oh gosh, I'm definitely going to make mistakes. There's no getting around that. But one of the things that I am doing right now is I have made up my wish list of data, and I am persistently communicating my wish list of data. So I'm not going to let myself be held back by what data is available. I am going to try to basically power through and advocate and say, this is the data that we need to measure in order to have a positive impact on the company, on the ROI, everything of that sort. That's something that I didn't do a lot of in the past. I would be kind of like, I wish I had this. It would be so nice. But then I would manipulate myself into like whatever I had available. I'm not doing that now. Now I'm really, really powering through and saying, nope, this is my wish list. And like, I mean, I literally have a document up on my screen that is like my wish list, um, which
And
is kind
how
of
do you
cool.
make those wishes come true? Are you just like working really closely with the data science and analytics team? Or are you like how do you make it happen? Or what's your plan?
Yeah, what's my plan? So it's actually a lot of working at a lot of different levels, because the type of data that I need, you need to be able to get people at all different levels to see value in it and to understand why it's important. So, for instance, I've been working with our chief customer officer. I've been working with the head of our customer experience operations team. I've been working with our data team. I've been working with some of the folks in marketing. Um, because what I'm asking for is not just going to impact me, it's also going to impact how we approach self-serve. It's going to impact how we approach onboarding, new member experience, customer lifecycle. And so it's as much technical collaboration as it is strategic collaboration. And really trying to get people to kind of see that vision. And I think that's one important like takeaways, if I could throw it out to anyone, is when you talk about data, it's not just about you. It's not just about your community. Your goal is to weave community into everything you possibly can in an organization where it makes sense. And so, for instance, I'll give you examples. Like I mentioned earlier about advanced features. We know that customers who use advanced features tend to have lower churn. They tend to have, I think, higher ARR. There's a whole bunch of like known facts about this. I don't even include the community. So the theory is if we can get more people aware of advanced features and we raise advanced feature usage through the community, therefore it ends up positively impacting the organization. But how do you do that? You can't just do that through the community. That's also, you have to educate people. You have to have the right help docs. It has to be at the right points in the customer lifecycle journey, in product messaging. Um, so it's a lot of working together with other people, and not making it about just a community initiative.
Yeah, I totally get that where it's like you can say these things or have the community aware of these things, but then if they go to your help or support or other assets, you have to like work with other teams to make sure that like they're also their hands held or they're accompanied like along the whole entire life cycle, not just in the community
Right.
part. um Actually, there's a lot of audience questions, and like it does sound like the alarm went off to us, and it's funny seeing the chat be like, oh my gosh, that was so loud.
Oh,
We, but it's over now, I hope. Luckily it didn't ping me, but there's a question here from Danny. You kind of already went over some of this, but I like this feature how it like shows the question along the bottom. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, I like that.
But yeah, maybe you could give us some examples of like what is on your wish list for Calendly right now. I think people want like those tactical things to like to take in and frame them in their world.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that's on my wish list is the percent of weekly active users who are also members of the community or visitors of the community. Um, the logic there being is that if people are visiting the community, solving their questions, they should in turn be using our product because now they're educated and they're unblocked. I mentioned about advanced features. We also have a lot of collaborative features in Calendly, so we're doing a lot of work around that. We also want to measure things like the percent of upgrade, the percent of churn. Um, what else is on there? That's pretty much like all the big fun stuff. It's a lot of business metrics, which is
Yeah.
also really interesting because I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but it took me a hot moment to like get familiar with business metrics as a community manager. It's not something that we naturally walk in. Like I'm gonna guess most of us don't have MBAs. I know a few people probably on here do. I've seen some names pop up and I'm like, yeah, they have an MBA. But most of us don't. So we're not naturally business people. We're community people.
Yeah, that's a nice like segue into like another topic that I wanted to jump into, which is just like I feel like especially on the community manager side or even the DevRel side, it's like a lot of asks are being made of like, how is this work tying into business metrics and business
Yeah.
impact? And like it sounds like that's a lot of what your wish list items for like, how do I connect like what we're doing to the, showing an actual impact on the business. So like
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways we can take this question. I think one is maybe just sharing your experience of like how you've been able to like work and show that impact is maybe one starting point. But happy to take it a different direction if you think there's something more to it than that. Yeah.
Yeah. What I will say is like business metrics really weren't that important to me until I started getting to kind of like the director level with my career. Because up to that point, I was always being asked, how's the community doing? What's the community doing? Very, very pointed questions. And now, I've been at the point for a few years now where I'm being asked, it sounds a little harsh to say this, but it's kind of like justify why
Mhm,
you're
mhm.
here and why you need money. Which I remember the first time I was asked that question, I was like, oh, like just fear, actual fear. And then you eventually start realizing you're being asked that as opportunity to either undermine yourself or to actually gain more momentum and budget. And so it's better to do that. Um, what I will say, the gateway into business metrics for me was really around ROI. And specifically, I tend to work in support communities. And so, what I really, really started digging into was around cost deflection. So, actually saving us money by using the community, figuring out, if you have a community, as the number of support tickets goes down, are we serving more people? How many times can a single answer help someone else? And really questions like that. Um, and then from there, it really started expanding because once you start understanding the behavior of someone saying, okay, I went to the community, now I don't need to submit a support ticket, you start asking questions like natural questions of did they upgrade? Did they renew? Did they churn? Did they use this feature? Are they a beta tester? Like there's so many directions you can go. Like once you start asking that, kind of um, basic deflection question, you start wanting to know so much more about customer behavior.
I like how you bringing it all back to answering and asking the right kind of questions. Yeah. Well, okay. So say the first one the first thing you mentioned is just like, okay, it's just pure like by having this community and it's reducing our support costs. Like people are self-serving. Like how do you find that out? Like, are you surveying people and then you just kind of like approximate? Like, are you looking at hard data? Like, how do you actually get that to that metric?
Yeah. So, to give you an example, one of the companies that I consulted for several years ago, um, we had stood up a very, very, very large community for them. That community really, really took off, like 1,200 questions a day type of took off, which was a lot. Um, but I said about don't work in a silo, don't make it all about community. One of the things that we did specifically with that community was we constantly, like weekly, sometimes daily, would go to support and say, what are you seeing for volume? And what we started noticing was that if we were going up, support volume was going down. And because of that, we were able to start quantifying what we were actually seeing and what was likely the percentage. So, we saw X number of questions up, they saw, some extra number going down. That was really, really exciting. At Zapier, we actually had the ability to basically track a user, their life cycle, and say, okay, if you visited community or a self-serve resource of ours, what did you do in the following 7 days? And that was really cool because that's when we started actually seeing, oh, someone visits a community, very unlikely that they're going to submit a support ticket, like really, really unlikely. But it's also incredibly more likely that they are going to successfully create a new Zap, or something like that.
Mm.
So it's not working in a silo. You can't make it about community. Some of the original ROI models were very much around what's just happening in community, how many searches, how many
Mhm.
answers, how many views, which is a great place to start with ROI. Like if you can't have those conversations or the other teams don't have the data, um, but your data becomes so much more accurate and so much more confident if you can work with other teams.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, I have just one more question before handing it over to audience questions. So for those in the
Yep.
audience, if you can start typing stuff in that you want Jillian to answer, that'd be helpful. But my last question is around, okay, it's based on kind of like your last answer, which is like, okay, we are doing these things, and like we can just measure just pure activity or engagements, and then in the ideal state, you want to like tie that to business impact. And I think all of this is like helpful for like, okay, we know what's going on here, but like where the real impact happens is when you know what inputs drive those outputs. So I'm like wondering if you like what are some inputs that are uncovered or that you've known, like, okay, if we invest here, then like this number is going to go up, and that's what we want to happen. If you could share an example or like how you think about that, it'd be really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So some of the things that I've definitely noticed with communities, and I feel like some of these aren't going to be surprises to any of you. Consistent taxonomy is huge. If your taxonomy is just wild, uncontrolled, you're not using tagging, you're not using consistent information architecture, um, you're really going to struggle to have your answers get reused, is basically the best way to put it. And one of the things that ties into that is community is kind of an opportunity to be the connector between how your organization speaks and how your customers speak. And kind of like to give you an example of that, one of the things that we're kind of playing around with here at Calendly is, um, if you use our product and you send a link to someone, that thing that you sent out comes from an event type. Most people don't call it that. They call it a
Mm.
Calendly link. They call it a calendar. They call it all sorts of other things. And so that's one of the areas I'm putting a lot of my time. And I even argue I'm putting a lot of my budget into taxonomy, information architecture, and making sure that I'm the link between how our customers speak and how our organization speaks. Um, I'd say that's probably one of the really, really big things. Uh, the other one would be around moderation. Anything you can do to really kind of ensure consistency and experience, is really going to drive your metrics in the right direction. Um, to kind of give you an example of this, there was a
Mhm.
community I'd taken over at one point, and they were like, yeah, we do an audit every 45 days. And if someone doesn't have an answer at that point, we give them an answer. And I was like, you're giving them an answer 45 days after. Ooh, I killed that so fast. I was like, that is not okay. Not okay. Um, Fortunately, we got the community to a point where basically within 72 hours, you would have a response from us, like a meaningful response. It may not be the answer, but at least you've been acknowledged. We've said, yep, we have some questions for you. And then really kind of building out from there, making sure that people were getting information. If a post was not getting anywhere, it needed to be either escalated, and if we were waiting on the customer and that had gone for more than like 7 to 10 days, we would ice it. But that consistency and experience also meant that other people knew what to expect, which ends up positively impacting your sentiment, your satisfaction, and general happiness overall with the product. So I think those are kind of like the two big areas.
Yeah, yeah. Really, yeah, really interesting. It's almost like an extended arm of customer success and support in some ways too. Yeah,
It
sounds like.
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah. um, okay, so I'm gonna just start selecting some questions here that have been
Yeah.
upvoted. This one we might have already hit on a little bit, but it's just kind of like when you're gathering data from several sources, like how do you dashboard that? Kind of hit on this already, but I don't know if there's any more to elaborate there.
Um, okay. So if you have fun data tools available to you, use them. And by fun data tools, what I mean is if you have Tableau, you have Power BI, you have a data nerd who loves creating dashboards. All of these are viable options. You can absolutely use these. The reason I mention this is that those tools effectively almost act as a data warehouse and let you start pulling things together, which is really, really cool. It's also funny because, here it is. Kevin's from Common Room. Common Room also does a really good job of pulling things together. So go check them out too. You're not
Thanks for the
exactly a
plug.
true data tool. Yeah, I just say it though, but like it is true though. I mean, anything you can use to kind of like act as your data warehouse is really, really going to help you. If you can't do that and you literally only have Google Sheets or Excel available to you, that is okay. My recommendation though is work with one source at a time, figure out what you want from that source before you start just mushing everything together. Um, for
Because it could just be
instance,
like a lot
I
of noise.
use
Is that why?
Yes, like for instance, I'm on Insided, now known as Gainsight Digital Hub. I don't love the name, but whatever. Um, but like when you go to pull an export from them, when I tell you that there are seriously 20 columns of data that don't need to see the light of day ever, I'm not kidding. And so I always kick those columns out before I start doing any data analysis that requires me to start kind of like mushing things together because I don't need to be looking at 150 rows of data. Um, by the time I'm done mushing everything together, I want to be looking at like maybe 10 to 15.
Yeah.
Um, so that's definitely going to help you out.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love to push people towards Common Room, I'm like, a lot of this data is public or it's extractable, and like a spreadsheet works a lot of the time too. So if you can get it into a spreadsheet form, or even better, like maybe a data warehouse or something, it's totally doable. Like you don't need Common Room to do that. It's helpful when you can like stitch all the things together, but like just starting out with just getting data into something that's searchable or modifiable is a good start.
Yeah.
Well, I have another question here. It's kind of like a classic question that we get a lot, which is just like, how do you define community? Is it like community of practice? Like, is it within like a Slack or Discord channel? Is it like beyond that? Like, I wonder how you have maybe like the iterations of like what you've seen in your experience would be also interesting to hear.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a spicy take. I'm one of those people who definitely believes that a community is a dedicated platform where people have shared artifacts, shared behaviors. Um, and what that really means is somewhere where you're able to find information later on. With that being said, that kind of pushes Slack and Discord out as far as I'm concerned. And again, that's a spicy take. That is my perspective. It does not mean that is the universal truth. Um, but I tend to work with communities of knowledge and communities of support. So I'm working with communities where something can be valid for 4 or 5 years, maybe even more. If you're running a community of practice or a community of interest or something like that, Slack or Discord could be okay for you. And to kind of give an example of this, um, for fun, I don't know why I do this to myself. I am one of the admins for the largest women's mountain biking group on Facebook. We have 40,000 members last I checked. It might be more than 40,000 now, but it's a lot of people. And it's on Facebook, which means it's sheer and utter chaos. It's more of a community of interest than it is a community of anything else. And what that means is that every single day, someone is asking a question about helmets. Every single day. We've answered the question. several hundred times. There are several hundred threads on helmets, but people are going to keep asking it. And that's okay, because it wasn't meant to be a community of knowledge. It's great if someone does find that old post and says, oh, great, this Smith helmet is fantastic. Great. I'm happy for them. But it's not the intention of the community. And so with that one, it's okay. We could be on Slack. We could be on Discord. We can be on Facebook. But Calendly community is meant to be a community of support and knowledge. And what that means is we will never be on Slack or Discord or Facebook. We needed a dedicated community platform that was going to be that collective evergreen knowledge resource.
Mhm. And then what happens when there are support questions on support or knowledge questions that are like outside of the bounds of that? Is that like someone else in marketing's role that's kind of like surfacing those to you? Or maybe like since you already have the knowledge and support on inside it, you could that serve as like your reference, and like the person who's responsible for fielding these other things kind of like points them to that. So it's like community supporting that function as well, or that like a pain point as well. Yeah. Is that
Yeah, so we will get to that point with Calendly, because right now we pretty much just tell people, hey, that's a great question. Go submit a support ticket. At Zapier, we actually got to the point where our social team, our marketing teams would reply with, "That's such a great question. Here's Calendly community. You know, you're welcome to go ask on there." Or people would search the community, find a relevant post, and say, "Hey, go check this out. If this doesn't help, feel free to, you know, ask your question on Calendly community." Um, but with all that being said, it's also okay if there's information in other places. I don't think that's ever a bad thing. I think the purpose of companies and brands having communities, though, is it allows us to have some level of like trust and authenticity, and people know where they can go. You know, for instance, you can go to Calendly community soon, ask a question, and no one's going to be like, "That's a dumb question. Like, why are you even here?" I can't promise that experience on Reddit. I don't control Reddit. I don't own the community on Reddit. And so it kind of depends on what people want. It's okay to have multiple things.
Yeah, yeah. Another related question here from Prina around um, shifting focus from community of interest to knowledge, uh, or like some other type. I don't know if that's a common thing, but maybe you have experience there. I don't know. Yeah.
It's so actually, you know, what I tend to see is a lot of communities of support that want to shift to one of those. That's usually what I tend to see
Mm,
is, people are like, "Oh my gosh, we became a support community. We actually wanted to be a collaboration community. How do we change this?" And a lot of that actually goes back to when I was talking about architecture and customer lifecycle. Um, Customers, you know, kind of going back to my original thing I said about it's all science, it's all physics. Customers will take the least path of resistance to get the outcome that they want. I feel it's like Newton's fifth law of gravity or something, right? Um, and so basically, if customers want a community to be support, it's going to be support. If you want it to be collaboration, you need to find a way to get them what they need, but to also expose them to the behaviors that you want them to exhibit. So, for instance, Calendly community, we have 3 key behaviors front and center. It's the first thing you see on our community. Get help. You can go there and ask a question. Connect and learn. You're looking for inspiration and to connect with peers. Go there. You're looking to find out what's like, you know, the newest from Calendly. Go here. And because of that, it kind of almost acts like, I can't even think of an example. All I think of right now is like a river. It's basically like putting like big pillars in the middle of a river, and you're deflecting the flow of water. That's basically what we're doing. We're putting behaviors in front of people so they don't even need to guess what to exhibit. They're given 3
mhm.
behaviors and they can follow those behaviors.
It's like what's a good analogy? Choose your own adventure, but like within a limited
Yeah.
scope. Yeah.
It's funny you
uh,
say choose your own adventure, because that's exactly what it says about those 3 behaviors. It says choose your adventure. So
oh, there we go.
yeah.
I didn't even cheat and look at that. So,
No.
uh, just a quick question here around like what you chose for your platform. It was Insighted, right? I don't know.
Yeah, so we chose Insighted. As I said, it's now known as Gainsight Digital Hub. I'm going to keep giving Gainsight grief about that, but that's fine. But yeah, we're on that platform. It's a solid platform for us. I'm sure probably one of the follow-up questions that someone is thinking, so I'm gonna say it for you, so you don't need to ask. Why did we choose that? Well, because we already use Gainsight products. We use Zendesk, um, and we really wanted something that had strong integrations. So by picking this one, we can automatically use all the Gainsight stuff. We're able to use Zendesk federated search, as well as be able to escalate tickets out of the community and into Zendesk. And the other important thing to call out is that inside it has really, really incredible Zapier integrations. So that means that there's like 6,000 other apps that we can connect to because we picked inside it.
Yeah. And what's your, well, this is a hard question probably, but like, what is, can you have a unique experience with Zapier. So like, what is the Zap that you use that was like one of your favorites, or something that was like really interesting and cool? This is a question from me, not the group.
Okay. Favorite. I mean, like it's really funny. I feel like my Zapier usage never got to like really cool. It's more kind of like the things that made my life so much easier. Um, I guess the one that I'll say it's there's two. There's one that I use personally. I still use it today, and then there's like the ones that are really great for community managers. Personally, I have all of my Google Calendar events are created as tasks on my Asana so that I never overcommit my days. Because there's nothing worse than having 7 hours of meetings and you throw 20 tasks on the day because you didn't reconcile the two things. So I use Zapier for that. For communities, one of the things I love is you can basically tell Zapier, hey, anytime we get spam, something's flagged, something's pending, basically anything needs attention, you can automatically kick it into Slack using a Zap, which is really nice because I don't want to be tied to my community platform 24/7, 365. But it's a lot easier for me to be tied to my Slack notifications. So you can get really intelligent and kind of like allow yourself to turn off your brain and know that if something needs attention, you'll know about it.
Yeah, for better or worse, we all kind of live in Slack now.
We do. Yep.
That makes sense. Okay. That is that we're a little bit over time, although that's why we give about 15 minutes to get to the top of the hour if we need to. But is there anything else that we missed, or anything else you want to like leave the group with here? Would love to get like people probably want to know where to reach you, or like where they can consume your content. So anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, probably far more than any normal person should be. So feel free to find me on LinkedIn. I love talking to people. I'm happy to share my Calendly link and find some time to chat. So please feel free to reach out to me there. I do a lot of writing on there too. I have like this whole like community nerd kind of series I've been doing for like 2 years, maybe more. So yeah, that's me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jillian. And everything was recorded. We'll share all that stuff. And thanks everyone for joining. Have a good one. Sorry about the alarm in the middle of things, but all good. Bye.